Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at Yoon-Suin 2nd edition. This book is an absolute landmark in more ways than one. For starters, the first edition of this book, which I have right over here, was the very first OSR book that I reviewed on my channel more than 10 years ago. It played an absolutely crucial role in introducing me to the whole OSR scene and getting me involved in old school Dungeons & Dragons. It was my first big example of what a D&D or an RPG setting could look like, a whole vision of the game that was radically different than what I was seeing from Wizards of the Coast or any other publisher. It's the kind of book that if you show it to someone who's into 5e, it kind of breaks their brain in terms of how much world and how much gameplay can be packed into one book. But most people today still haven't heard of it. So what is Yoon-Suin? This is an exotic Eastern-themed setting created by Noisms, who is a blogger who does the blog Monsters and Manuals, which is one of the longest-running and most prolific OSR blogs. Here's our back cover. Yoon-Suin is a campaign toolbox for fantasy games, giving you the equipment necessary to run a sandbox campaign in your own Yoon-Suin, a region of high adventure shrouded in ancient mysteries, opium smoke, great luxury, and opulent cruelty. The world inside is a bit of a blend of some influences from India, some from maybe Mongolia and Tibet, all put into a blender and filtered through a D&D lens. It's also fascinating in the sense that, unlike some other D&D settings that are much more explicit about what you can find there, like Dolmenwood is a good example of that, where that one has a hex by hex description of what is going on in every part of this fantasy world, and you just go through it bit by bit and read what's there. Yoon-Suin is all about compiling your own Yoon-Suin from all of the tools and the random tables inside this. And there are a ton of random tables. Almost every aspect of this world is on a table somewhere, and by mixing and matching and combining them together, you can generate this whole world that is uniquely yours. All right, let's take a look inside and see how this book manages that magic trick. But first, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by the Kickstarter smash hit Legend in the Mist, a narrative rustic fantasy RPG. This is a story-driven game inspired by legends like Lord of the Rings, Princess Mononoke, and The Wheel of Time, where your backstory and roleplay choices actually affect gameplay. The core rule is simple. Roll 2d6 and add +1 for each relevant narrative tag on your character sheet. On a 10+, you succeed, and on a 6 or less, you fail. If you roll in between, you'll succeed but also face a complication of some kind. This means you can just describe what sets your character apart, and those descriptions become your stats. You can use it to play any kind of character in any setting, and it comes with a built-in solo or co-op mode. Right now you can get the special bundle, available through Cyber Monday. This is the last chance to get the early bird price, and includes the core book PDF so you can start playing right away, as well as guaranteeing you a physical copy when the game ships early next year. A big thanks to Legend in the Mist for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check out their discounted game bundle right now using the link in the description below. So first of all, inside the book, we have a map of the general region. We have the Yellow City, which is the main metropolis hub of this setting, and it is at the base of the God River, which comes down from the mountains up here. We have this big swampy area, the Lamaranch, however you say that, where the water is going through all of these different streams, and everything is very soggy and marshy, and there's a lot of river people doing a lot of trading. There's the Topaz Isles out here and the Gulf of Moraes. Upper Drukgyul and Lower Drukgyul. We have the Mountains of the Moon, which are, I think, kind of like the Himalayas. Mountains that are so high they're virtually up in outer space and might be populated by dragons. There is the Oligarchies, a civilization up here that's at the source of the God River. The mysterious region of Sug, not sure how to say that. The 100 Kingdoms, which is a huge wide landscape full of many different metropolises that are all in different rivalries with each other. And then there is the Lahag, which is this thick forest that surrounds the Gulf. Every one of these locations has a big, thick section of the book dedicated to it, with adventures and locations and NPCs and hooks and tons of things to build out that region as players explore it. Right away, I should point out what this book has in the 2nd edition that the 1st edition didn't have. So this has the complete text of the 1st edition, but it adds on a bunch of extra things. For example, it includes some extra monsters, it has a bunch of new appendixes that help flesh out the world some more, and especially it has a number of more fully written adventures, or rather adventure locations that you can drop your players into and you have something to run right away instead of having to generate it on your own. So if you're a big fan of the 1st edition, don't worry, none of that material is being lost, it's just being expanded upon. And as usual, I'll put links in the description below for where you can pick this up in PDF or in print form. One thing that's really nice about the way it starts is it starts with a traveler's journal describing his adventures traveling through this land. Now, normally starting out with a bunch of fiction is something I'm not a huge fan of in RPGs. I feel like it's kind of self-indulgent and it's often kind of boring, but I really love the writing in this book. There is a dreamlike quality to the entire setting, and a feeling of it almost being like in a fairy tale come to life. The Yellow City itself is the kind of base of operations that the players are probably going to be working off of. It might be a good place to start if you wanted to start somewhere a little bit less dangerous than out in the wilds. The Yellow City is a city famous for 3 major things: knowledge, tea, and opium. It's also run by a new race in the D&D world, which is the Slugmen. These tend to be rich and opulent and just hanging around doing slug things, and often sending you as adventurers off on adventures, although it is possible to play a Slugman if you want to. There's also the Crabman race, which is sort of like the slave underclass in the Yellow City. They are fantastically good at fighting, although not so great at anything else. The author talks about his journeys through the Lahag, which is a thick forest roamed by ghosts and cruel beings, with a number of interesting stories and anecdotes that he's heard along the way of things that people have found in the forest. There's the Topaz Isles, which is the home of the Crabmen, which has a lot of potential treasure because there's a lot of jewels and mines out there on those islands that have not been fully explored. But it's also quite dangerous because there is a powerful dragon that hangs out there that kind of rules the Crabmen and eats them periodically, but also keeps a lot of foreigners out. By taking you on this detailed travelogue through all of these locations, it does a great job of explaining the setting in terms of the tone that it's going for. This section is on how to actually use the book. And this is a book, like I said, primarily of random tables. So it's really nice that there's this section here on how to combine them and to use them for maximum effect. There's even a practical example of him building out the early sessions of a campaign, how to take a number of different factions and select those as the ones that are going to be important. As you're picking those groups, you can roll up conflicts and you can roll up rumors and hooks that go along with them. And then you can start rolling up NPCs. And once you have all of these details, you start seeing the connections that are emerging between them and start linking them into a web. And the more you build up this web of connections between people and places and factions and things, the more dense and intricate it becomes and the more it implies about the world, and that inspires further creativity. Being an old school game, this very much focuses on player choice and player freedom. Players can do whatever they want, they can go in any direction, they can interact with any part of your setting however they like. So your goal here is not to create a story or a set of events that are going to happen. Instead, your goal is to create a dense, interesting situation that is ripe for exploring and pulling apart. And because all of these things are linked together as you're designing them, as players start investigating one aspect or fighting some people over here, the other aspects are going to react to that, and the whole thing will feel more alive. There's a short chapter here on character generation. This assumes you're using old school D&D rules, probably something like BX or original D&D, which means that it's going to include things like race as class for the Crabmen. Humans can be any class, and humans are the most populous race in this region. Slugmen can be magicians or holy men, which is like a cleric, and dwarves can be warriors or adventurers. Next section is a Beastiary, going through all the different types of monsters that you might find throughout this whole section of the world. I really like the art, actually, by Matthew Adams. It's very minimalistic. They're almost like shadow puppets or something on a wall. They feel very primal, and they really energize my imagination, even though they're very simple. I think he uses something like Microsoft Paint to make it because it's almost like pixel art, but with very tiny pixels. And it creates this very soft, almost dreamlike quality that's very distinct. Some of the monsters include ice ghosts and limpet men, mountain witches, mantids, mi-goes, which is something from Lovecraft. There's mummified monks, which are a little bit like liches, I think, in this setting. There's nagas, nymphs, ogre mages, and tons of other creatures which are completely original for just this world. I love the were creatures. There's were apes, were moray eels, were pangolins, types of human hybrids that you don't see in most other settings. The next chapter is the first of the different regions broken down into random tables, and this one is for the Yellow City. Most of the different regions follow this format, so we'll give you just a couple examples of how these are structured. You have lots of different social groups, like cockroach clans, noble houses, criminal bands, and they all have conflict sources. This is all about connecting things with conflict, right? In order to make things more actionable and more adventurous. Each of those social groups that you rolled has further tables that break down things even more, giving you a number of different NPCs, like maybe it's an archivist and a historian, or a zealous fanatic, and some rumors and hooks to go along with them. Like maybe the order is in contact with outsiders. Outsiders meaning things from beyond time and space. After all of those different social groups, you have Yellow City personages. So you have lots of different NPCs, including their names, their motivations, which is really important. So you know why that they are acting, and it lets you connect them to other people more easily. They all have their job, like maybe they are an astronomer or a cockroach butcher, and they have a little spice to add to them. Like they're very good looking, or they smell awful, or maybe they are absurdly tall. There's some general hooks and rumors that you can generate. Like you might say that a criminal wants to kidnap an assassin. Or you can roll on the more fleshed out rumor table with something like a sect of money worshippers has recently brought in a huge consignment of gold, silver, and platinum from the mountains of the moon. Or russet mold has taken hold in a ghetto and is turning everyone into mold men. There's 30 different random encounters, so as you're just wandering around the Yellow City, you can throw these at your players whenever you want. Like there's a duel between two dandies. They ask one of the PCs to adjudicate. Or maybe a blockade around an abandoned old mansion. A robber has kidnapped a local child and is holding him or her hostage inside. Vigilantes have him surrounded. You can even roll up a random location so that these things happen in different places every time. What I love about these is that it's not just you meet this type of person. There's always a thing that's going on, and whether you involve yourself in it is kind of up to you. But what's important is that things are often so dynamic. They imply a living world, and they imply lots of different ways that they could be tackled. You can generate city neighborhoods over here. If you want to go outside the Yellow City into like the suburbs and the wilderness just nearby, there's a whole bunch of tables just for that. If you want to look at smugglers or mines, sea nomads, observatories, pearl divers, there's even full paragraph write-ups for sample hex contents. So if you put this world into a hex map, you can fill it up with something more meaty. For example, you might find the old man in the lagoon, who's like an old stoic philosopher living out by himself in a life free of complications. He doesn't want to be bothered, but he is a 9th level holy man and will use his power to aid others, provided that they sacrifice an item of great value by throwing it into the lagoon. If you want to do some more dangerous adventuring in the Yellow City, you could go into the Old Town, which is overgrown and full of all sorts of threats, like gelatinous cubes or other NPC explorers, or even squidmen. There's D30 special sites you can scatter around in this area, like maybe there's a statue holding in its hands an ancient artifact. If the artifact is removed, the statue breathes a cloud of poison gas in a 30-foot cube around it. You can scatter these all over the area. Plenty of ancient artifacts for you to use, inhabited ruins, cultists, exiles, sentinels, revolutionaries, hermits, squatters. The more you go through this book, the more you realize there's just an unlimited amount of information and stuff for you to use. The goal of this book is actually fairly similar to what I was trying to do with my book Knave, which is also a book full of D100 random tables for all sorts of things. But Knave is designed to be much more generic for any kind of fantasy adventure, whereas Yoon-Suin is just about this one world and it's very focused on that. Let's look at another area. This is La Hague and the 100 Kingdoms. So unlike the Yellow City, which is just one place, this zooms out quite a bit and allows you to generate entire cities as you go. Want to generate a starting polity, a city where you start out in? You might decide that it is a plutocracy and it has a bunch of issues and assets, has flavor locations and characteristics. Maybe there are some rival agents going on there. Maybe there's a slave uprising. Maybe there's currently a witch hunt going on, or a great forge, or maybe subterranean ruins have been discovered. Each of these ideas comes with a whole bunch of NPCs and hooks and things for you to make that thing come alive. Just as before, you can build up the PC's social circle, but it might be something like a house of pleasure, or a tea shop or opening den, or an elephant racing stable. All of these are different in each place. This is not really a book that you read all the way through. This is a book that is a menu of ideas that you sample from and select from as you require them. In effect, the author has done all of your brainstorming for you. He's given you so many good ideas that just need to be linked together. When you start combining all these tables together, you end up with millions and millions of possible combinations, meaning that no two game masters are going to have exactly the same Yoon-Suin. You're going to have a world that feels very similar, but the details of how it works, what are the conflicts, what are the adventures, what are the treasures that you can uncover, is going to be different every time. Skipping past all of the regions, we have appendixes for poisons. We have different types of opium, because that's a big feature of the setting, specialist teas. We have a trade system, because players might want to start traveling up and down the God River and trading resources. You want to throw some psionics or fortune telling in there. You want some random ruin, lair, and dungeon creation. This book has just got you covered. Magical tattoos. There's deities for generating different aspects and spheres of influence. You want to hire hirelings. You can generate new ones right off of this. Collectors of rarities. There's an NPC party generator, so you can run into a rival adventuring party, which are always really fun. Lots of random tables for encounters that you can use in all sorts of different places. Weapons, treasure tables, And finally, we have adventure sites. These are the fleshed out adventures, 12 of them that you can drop into your world. You have things like the Morning Garden of the Unrequited Lover, which is inside a building or a little fortress. We have the Hornet Sting, which is an outdoor location where you're exploring around a mountain on an island. Let's take a look at this one, for example, the pit near blank, because you can fill that in with any location that you already have. Every adventure starts off with one of these one-page spreads that has a number of hooks to get the players involved, rumors surrounding the adventure, so you give them a little bit more information, and anything else weird that happens to be going on there. Like this pit is haunted. There's a ghost here that wants to recruit people to take revenge on someone, and he compels not through force of will, but through the seductive magnificence of his noble bearing and the irresistible logic of his argument, which makes disobedience to him seem profoundly childish and irrational. There's also a number of different factions here that have their own reasons for hanging out in this pit. I really like all of the maps in these adventures. They're a bit isometric. They're very easy to read. You can tell just from looking at it what's going on in each room. It has a lot of OSR structure to it in the sense that it's not linear. There's a number of ways you can get into this pit. There's a number of ways that you can get out. Many of the rooms have multiple ways to reach them, so there's a focus on exploration here. Also, the fact that many of these adventures have multiple factions means that there's a lot more room for social dynamics and for trying to convince one faction to move against another or join you. That being said, the actual contents of the adventures are, I would say, on the dry side. By which I mean that they're fairly procedural and they're fairly basic in terms of the contents of each location. You're moving from room to room, being cautious, trying to find the best route through the place, and using what resources you have to your advantage. I do like the fact that when there are traps, it describes how they work. Like there's a tripwire that leads up to a net filled with rocks on the ceiling. So you set off the tripwire and all the rocks fall on your head. When you have physical descriptions like that, then you can actually weaponize the trap or disable it in other ways, which is nice. Now, I do think that the actual formatting of each of the room descriptions could be improved significantly. We're still in the mode here where we just have a number of paragraph blocks describing what's going on there. So when you come to a new room, if you haven't read it before, you have to read multiple paragraphs and then in your head separate out what's obvious, what's not obvious, what do I explain to the players first, and so forth. A more modern formatting system that used bolding and used bullet point hierarchies and so forth in order to separate out the information so you immediately know what to grab and what's not important for later would make this much easier to run on the fly. That being said, the descriptions that he does have for each room are good. They do get to the point. They don't give you a lot of useless information, which I appreciate. One other point regarding the formatting, this second edition has a new font, which maybe is a little bit more professional looking than the one in the first edition, but I find the font in the first edition to actually be much more readable. These words just stand out more, they're clearer, they're much easier to scan on the fly, whereas in this, there's just a lot of really thin letters, and I think the font is a bit smaller, and it just makes it a little bit harder to read. Other adventures include some fighting pits. This one's called the Falls of the Pale Naga. This one looks like a lot of fun because there's a water element to it, and there's a lot of verticality, which can lead to some really interesting dynamics. This one looks like a lot of fun too. The Tower of the Experimenter in Lightened Glass. This is a single tower of many rooms containing unusual equipment and experiments. Figuring out how to take advantage of those experiments will give the PCs considerable power, but that will not be straightforward. That's my kind of adventure. There is an index at the back breaking down how to find all the different tables and random generators, the different adventure sites, encounter tables, and so forth. And I really like how there is some standard starting hex maps for each of the different types of regions. It immediately gives you something to work off of if you want to start dropping encounters and interesting locations down and have your players start exploring around. The credits are actually at the back of the book. Matt Adams did the art, but Tom Fitzgerald did all of the maps. And that is Yoon-Suin. This thing is a marvel of world building, but it's world building in a very unique way. It's a kind of world building that wants the game master to be a very direct participant in building the world along with the author. It's a book that was a real landmark when it first came out 10 plus years ago, and surprisingly remains that still today, as not a lot of other people have tried to do this since. I'm very interested to hear if any of you have run Yoon-Suin campaigns in the past and how those went in terms of generating everything as you proceeded. Let me know down in the comments below, and thanks for watching everybody. I'll see you next time.